Hello, my name's Colum Lynch. I'm the UN reporter for Devex News, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Matthew Crentsil, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees representative in Uganda and a veteran of the organization who's been with UNHCR for the last 30 years with assignments currently in Uganda, but previously in Venezuela, Ethiopia, Geneva, other parts of the world. So really pleased to have you with us. Mr. Crentsil has been recently nominated by his country, Ghana, to enter the race to serve as the next UN High Commissioner for Refugees. He will be up against a growing slate of aspirants, including candidates from Canada, Finland, France, Germany, and Switzerland, and beyond. So why don't we get started? It's no secret that the UN Refugee Agency has been facing some headwinds over the last couple of years, but in the last year particularly. We have budget cuts from the US and other governments that resulted in some 5,000 layoffs in the organization this year. Filippo Grandi, the current High Commissioner, recently said that the refugee agency is in a $300 million hole. And this is in a year where it's already seen its overall budget shrink by as much as $1.3 billion. There's rising anti-refugee sentiment in Europe, in the US and in Europe. So, with that background, why would you want this job? And what do you plan to do to get it out of the hole that it's in?
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are, Mr. Lynch, and thanks for this opportunity to have this very important discussion today. It is true that the humanitarian world is in distress now, and UNHCR being a big humanitarian organization is no exception to that. You already mentioned the gaps that we are currently facing, and how do we get out of that? Anytime I have to answer this question, I start by saying this, that whenever there is a shortage of funds, there is the first reaction is often a knee-jerk reaction that comes up, is that let's look for more money. Indeed, we have to look for more money because without money, we cannot implement the project that we have, programs that we have. But beyond that, the question that should come to mind is, how well are we using the money that we have already received? How efficient are we in doing what we do? Are we doing the right things? Are we prioritizing? Are we focused on what UNHCR was set up to do? And that is where we have mixed reactions coming. I would want to be the High Commissioner for Refugees, especially at this moment. I've been asked this question a number of times before. Why now? The financial meltdown and everything. And it's also an opportune moment because there are big discussions happening with regards to the reform of the UN at this time, after 80 years. So this is the time that I think my knowledge and expertise in humanitarian operations spanning over 31 years comes to the fore. I have been, I started as a local staff, being a field assistant in administration, then worked in administration, a finance officer, a senior program officer, deputy representative, senior desk officer, representative in some of the most difficult contexts that we have in the world, like Venezuela, now in Uganda, and also a director of UNHCR Business Transformation Program. With all the knowledge and experience acquired, I think this is the time that in the course of this discussion that you need a high commissioner who knows the ropes, who has done this before, who has experienced this before. Because yes, reforms all right, but we have to be very careful the way we do these reforms. Otherwise, we cut a nerve. There are so many complications and complexities when it comes to refugee operations. It's not the same in all the locations. We have different contexts all over the world. So it requires somebody who has seen it. And I've worked in 4 continents. I've been in some of them repeatedly. Therefore, I feel very well equipped to be able to address this issue now by working more efficiently. I authored a paper on efficiencies for the Uganda operation. And as I'm sure you know, Uganda is the biggest refugee program that we have in Africa and one of the biggest in the world. I authored this paper on efficiencies, which has been shared by the hierarchy of my organization with all regional bureau directors to share with the countries under them that this is the way to do business. So being efficient, focusing or refining what we do, what we were set up to do, is number one, is key. Secondly, who do we work with? How do we do the work we do? At the end of the day, who is the beneficiary? I'll sum it up in these 4 areas: that working efficiently, refining what we do best. UNHCR was set up several years ago. I don't want to go into that history to veer us on a tangent, but to actually ensure international protection for refugees, people who are fleeing their country for different reasons. I mean, could it be it by way of nationality, by religion, political opinion, membership of a social group, and so on and so forth. But then over the years, we seem to have veered off a little bit, and for good reason, because UNHCR, unlike other UN agencies, does not deal in one theme. UNHCR deals with refugees, international protection for refugees, and refugees need some of everything, from health to protection to water, sanitation, livelihoods, and all. But can we do everything for everybody all the time? We can't. Secondly, the emergency structures that we put in place when we are receiving refugees are supposed to be temporary. But we have a situation whereby some of these emergency structures we put in place to receive refugees, attend to them quickly, persist for years, decades. For instance, we will find ourselves responding to situations of health, education, water and sanitation, and livelihoods for several decades. And you would agree with me that sometimes you go to a refugee site, a refugee hosting site, and you are informed of the millions of dollars that have been spent on that site over the past 10, 20 years, and you ask yourself, where did all the money go? So we have to refine what we do, who we work with. Often we use...
Are you suggesting that, I mean, this has been a year of cuts, so are you suggesting that there's going to be a need that you would introduce even additional cuts if you came into office? I mean, you have talked about the importance of focusing on emergency response, on resettlement, on voluntary returns as kind of the core work that UNHCR does. But, are you going to be, basically sort of eliminating programs that don't fit directly into those priorities?
Yeah, we would have to prioritize. We would certainly have to prioritize in the face of funding.
But would you make, would the UNHCR that you led, would that become a smaller organization than we are seeing today?
Already, we've cut staff by 5,000. I will have to look at it. Do we need to go further or not? But we don't have to cut our noses to spite our face. That is the question. So that has to be done very carefully. I'm not at the helm at the moment, so I don't have the full details of some of the consequences of the cuts that have happened so far. Well, what I'm saying is that once we refine what we do, it will determine the number of staff that we hire, and the kind of staff that we hire.
Right. One of the things that is sort of interesting, you're in Uganda. It's a country, I think, that has about 2 million refugees. I think you have estimated that that number will likely grow to about 3 million by 2030. So, I mean, in terms of finding a durable solution to refugee crisis, for instance, in Uganda, what does it look like? Are we seeing a future where, the refugee crisis continues to be a sort of permanent aspect of, of this sort of international crisis that we've already seen? Is there kind of a need to start rethinking the destination of refugees? There has been lots of pushback in the US and Europe trying to take steps to prevent particularly African refugees from coming into Europe. What does it look like? I mean, do you see the refugee kind of reality changing, where refugees are leaving Uganda to go to other African countries or to Asia, or are there other destinations? And, basically, or are we seeing a situation where it's just going to be a constant, issue over the next decades, and the number is just going to grow and grow. And there isn't really a resolution to this problem. We're kind of stuck.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we have to embark on a concerted effort to address this issue. It's not going to be, no one has got the magic wand to wave once and all of a sudden the 2 million refugees, we wish them away. They are here now. They need help. We need to support them. So we have to take measures that would ensure that we don't have the numbers of refugees increasing. And those who are already in, we find durable solutions for them by way of local integration, for example. That is one of the ways by which we can actually address the refugee situation. And here we can take a cue from some of the developed countries where refugees don't remain refugees for decades when they go to these countries. I mean, there is a way by which they are integrated in one way or the other. But it is also true that the numbers that go to some of these developed countries are quite small compared to the numbers that come, or that go to lower income countries. Therefore, certain measures have to be taken to ensure at the regional level. Are we going to embark on burden sharing at the regional level? Regional resettlement is something that has not been probably explored very much. Refugees coming from countries that belong to the same economic zone, we have to look at that. Economic integration, regional integration is key to ensuring that we don't have nationals from the same countries in the same region becoming refugees in other countries, except when they are individually being persecuted for the reasons that I mentioned earlier on. But the bulk of refugees that we have in the global south are not those who are individually targeted. They are those who are recognized under conventions like the OAU Convention in Africa. I mean, and then we have the Cartagena Declaration in Latin America. These are mainly people who have fled their communities because of communal violence, disturbances in their communities. Not that they are individually targeted, but they still have the same protection needs. So once we are able to address this, we will find the numbers of refugees are going down. If at the regional level, and there are good examples in Latin America, for example, with the Venezuelans who went to the bulk of whom went to Colombia to be granted the temporary protection status, for example, and then granting them possibilities to work and move freely. That is a very big step that has to be emulated in many of the countries in the global south who have the bulk of refugees who are not individually targeted, but have fled their communities because of violence and civil wars and so on. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. You're the only African candidate in this race. UNHCR has been led primarily by Europeans since its founding. There has been a Japanese and Iranian high commissioner, but mostly Europeans. And I think some of that, I mean, when I talk to diplomats in New York, there is an expectation that it's going to be a European because there is an effort to try and ensure that donor countries continue to support UNHCR. So, I mean, I guess given that context, do you think that you have really much of a shot? I mean, you're not the first veteran UN official, nor from Ghana. Of course, we had Kofi Annan as the Secretary General many years ago. But is there a sense that you think that it's possible for an African to lead UNHCR? And if not, do you see that as something of a problem, that this is a position that has been sort of monopolized by a certain region for so many years?
Yeah, it has been so led by Europeans because of how UNHCR came into being. I mean, to address the problems of Europe, basically after the Second World War. So it was logical then for it to be led by Europeans. But what do we see now? After 75 years, the context has completely changed. I mean, the burden is more on the global south. That is where we have the bulk of refugees. I mean, in Africa alone, we have over 20 million refugees in Africa alone. And displacements in Africa constitute about over 30% of displacements around the world. We have about 123 million or so people, and the number keeps growing, the bulk of which is in Africa, and then in the global south. So leadership should also reflect this change in dynamics, change in context. And then why not? I mean, it does not necessarily have to depend on nationalities. It should depend on who can actually deliver. And here, let me link it with the funding question that you asked at the beginning. That I believe that donors have contributed thus far because they want to address a problem. It doesn't matter who is at the helm. Once they are convinced that whoever is at the helm will use their money more efficiently to address the problem that they want to solve, I believe they will go ahead and donate. But by the way, it is not like on sale for the highest bidder, the leadership. It's not. I mean, we have countries that have contributed. Otherwise, UNHCR should always be led by an American because the US pays contributes more than any other country. But it is not so. It depends on who has the expertise, who has the courage and the will to lead the organization, especially at a time when the bulk of the refugee crisis falls on the global south, where this keeps going on and on and on without an end in sight. So why not? I don't see myself being an African as a disadvantage at all, but rather an advantage at this particular time.
Yeah, so President Trump, since he came into office, has been quite negative about sort of the procedures and the rules for refugee resettlement. He's tried to sort of roll it back dramatically in the US. And you know, if you were in this position, you would have to deal with the Americans as well. And what would you do, you know, if you were to talk to President Trump directly or Secretary of State Marco Rubio, what would you say to them to try to sort of win back US support for, you know, the basic fundamental kind of goals and missions of UNHCR?
Yeah, I've said in other forums before that the concerns of the US and other countries would have to be listened to. I mean, the conventions were put in place, I mean, several years ago. I mean, the context was different and it is different now. So what are some of the key concerns? Some of the key concerns, and let me be very blunt here, the key concerns are people crossing several borders to go and seek refuge in the US, for example. Why cross 10, 15 countries to go and seek refuge there? Look, when there is danger, I mean, people would go to wherever they feel safest. But then I also recognize the fact that, I mean, you have to have a very good reason why you didn't seek asylum next door or 2 countries away, 3 countries away, but you cross 15 countries to go and seek asylum elsewhere. So the doctrine and the conventions are quite clear. It's the implementation of these doctrines and conventions that sometimes become problematic. So in order to avoid abuse of this system, and who is abusing them? The governments have got the instruments to ensure that if you don't meet the criteria, you are not admitted to their countries. The government has to listen to the constituents. What are the constituents saying? Do they open the door for everybody to rush in? No, that is not the answer. That is the sovereign duty of every, or sovereign prerogative of every country to control who is coming into their country. The instruments are there. If they come with X, Y, Z reasons why they have crossed so many countries and are coming there, of course, we can put in place accelerated procedures to treat their cases quickly. Those who don't qualify, sorry, I mean, they are not admitted. It's as simple as that. I mean, but if you say that the asylum system is being abused, by who? By those who would want to take advantage of the system. But then the countries have got the prerogative also to ensure that the conventions and the instruments in place are adhered to and implemented to the letter by putting in place accelerated procedures instead of long winding procedures that keep many of these people in this country for a long time. Another concern has been burden sharing in the neighborhood. For example, I mean, have we, I alluded to this earlier on, regional resettlement programs, people from the same economic community, I mean, almost interchanging refugees for decades. This is not the way to go at all. So I will be very, very open-minded about this. If we have to put in place certain instruments to tackle some of these inadequacies in the current system without necessarily throwing away the baby with the bathwater, because the convention has got some aspects of it that are sacrosanct. For example, the right to seek asylum. We cannot just throw that away because of concerns that the system may be abused. But then we have in place, and countries have in place, systems to ensure that the asylum procedures are not abused. We have to accelerate those ones, and those who don't qualify sorry, they don't qualify, and therefore they are not admitted.
Right. Okay. I think we're running out of, I would run out of time here, so we're going to have to wrap it up. But let me ask you one last question, and that is, there's been a lot of criticism about European policy over the refugee flight from Libya and the sort of procedures that Europe has put in to deny refugees the ability to get onto European soil. So supporting financing the Libyan Coast Guard, conducting surveillance operations so that they don't have to take refugees onto their own vessels and bring them to Europe and give them an opportunity to appeal for political asylum. There have been awful reports about mistreatment of these refugees back in Libya and detention centers. And I'm just sort of curious, like, how does UNHCR, I mean, there have been a lot of criticism about the way that UNHCR has kind of responded to this and has not spoken out clearly enough on, critically about sort of the European position. I'm curious what you think about that. I mean, Libya is a big deal in terms of sort of creating kind of a sort of moral crisis for the international community. So maybe you can give me a sense of that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, why would Europe put in place all these measures to control the inflow of people into their country? I mean, this is as a sovereign state, yes, they would have to control. And it is also, I support the fact that the Libyan authorities are being strengthened to put in place measures to curb this drift from, south, from mostly from many African countries towards Europe. The fact that they are not being treated well, I mean, is of concern. That has to be looked at. I mean, we have to look at it to make sure that are they not being treated well because of lack of resources or lack of capacities to be able to maybe offer them some decent, reception facilities whilst their cases are being looked into or not. That I'm not privy to that information yet. But I would support that the government, the authorities in Libya are supported to ensure that systems are in place and that they respect human dignity. Definitely, right. I mean, people flee for different reasons. I mean, and you cannot just punish them for seeking asylum or wanting to seek better lives elsewhere.
Right, but there's been a lot of reporting that in those detention centers that the authorities or whoever it is in control of those facilities, militias or government people, that that they have been dramatically abusing these people. They have been extorting money from their families, forcing them into forced labor. I mean, all sorts of awful reports that UNHCR must be aware of. And so, is that an area where you think that the UNHCR should be more outspoken on these abuses than they have been in the past? Or do you think that these reports are not credible?
Yeah, in my current role, I cannot confirm, attest to what you have just said. I mean, but I would have to look into it. I mean, if appointed as High Commissioner, certainly, I mean, no one should be subjected to that kind of treatment at all, and it will have to be investigated. And those who are out of tune be punished accordingly. So working very closely with authorities is key. I mean, why would they be doing that? Why would they be maltreating people? I mean, is it to serve as a deterrent, or is it out of malice, sheer malice, that they are treating people that way? These are all reports which I cannot attest to at the moment. I mean, given my current role, but it's something that I would have to look into very, very critically to address whatever gaps there are in reception facilities and the way people are treated there, working with the Libyan authorities. And like I said, we will have to find out why would they do what they do if it is true. Is it because of lack of capacity, lack of training, a lack of understanding of why people are seeking asylum? I mean, there has to be a reason if it is found out that this is true. And I'm sure working with the Libyan authorities and also the European countries who are very interested in this would go a long way to addressing this problem. We want to solve a problem, to stem the drift of people, I mean, going into Europe undeservedly, solely, looking for better lives. People would always
Right.
move to look for better life. Like when there's a problem in your country, the first thing you do is to seek a place where you find physical safety. After that comes well-being. You want to be okay. So it is not unnatural for people to want to seek well-being beyond where they have first sought asylum. But then that they should not use the asylum process to achieve that objective. That would be through another path of migration. So this has to be worked out. Like I said, the instruments are quite clear on this. Implementation sometimes a bit problematic because we have sometimes in some of these government institutions, we have a high turnover of staff who come in. They may not understand fully how these processes have to be run, and therefore they resort to all sorts of practices that are really unconventional and quite malicious in some cases.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking out the time to talk to us. We will be back in touch, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch. And then I hope we will have another opportunity to discuss even further. The time was so short. I had a lot to download, but well, unfortunately, the time is a limitation here. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll be in touch. Take care.